Three secrets. 1. Prophet. A journey to hell and back. Shazan Danish's near-death experience challenges everything we thought we knew about Islam. From the moment of his sudden chest pain to his descent into a realm of torment, Shazan's story builds towards a shocking encounter with Muhammad. The revelations that follow offer a perspective on salvation that could change lives and eternities. The morning of May 12, 2024, began like any other for Shazan Danish. As the sun rose over his quiet neighborhood, he stirred from sleep, unaware that this ordinary day would become the pivot point of his entire existence. Shazan's routine unfolded with familiar precision: a quick shower, a hearty breakfast, and the comforting ritual of morning prayers. His faith, a cornerstone of his identity, guided every aspect of his life. As he unfurled his prayer mat and faced Mecca, Shazan felt a sense of peace wash over him. The rhythmic recitation of verses from the Quran centered his thoughts, preparing him for the day ahead. Little did he know that in mere hours, his understanding of faith, life, and the afterlife would be shaken to its very core. The first hint of trouble came shortly after noon. A sharp twinge in Shazan's chest caught him off guard, momentarily stealing his breath. He brushed it off as indigestion, but the discomfort quickly escalated. Within minutes, the pain intensified to an excruciating level, radiating through his left arm and jaw. Panic set in as Shazan recognized the telltale signs of a heart attack. Gasping for air, he fumbled for his phone, desperate to call for help. But as his trembling fingers struggled to dial, his vision began to blur and darken at the edges. The room seemed to tilt and spin around him, reality slipping away like sand through an hourglass. Shazan's symptoms aligned with classic indicators of a severe cardiac event. The crushing chest pain, radiating discomfort, and shortness of breath were unmistakable red flags. As his body fought against the lack of blood flow to his heart, his brain began to react to the diminishing oxygen supply. Time seemed to slow and stretch as Shazan felt himself teetering on the brink of consciousness. The physical world began to fade, replaced by a strange sensation of weightlessness. It was as if an unseen force was gently pulling him away from his body, from the pain, from everything he knew. In those final moments of awareness, a kaleidoscope of emotions washed over Shazan. Fear mingled with a surprising sense of calm. Regret for things left undone battled with curiosity about what lay ahead. As his grip on reality loosened, Shazan experienced a profound sense of crossing over, stepping from one plane of existence into another. The pain in his chest faded, replaced by a sensation of floating. Shazan's last conscious thought was a mixture of wonder and trepidation, as he felt himself being drawn into an unknown realm. Little did he know that this was merely the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything he believed about life, death, and the nature of eternity itself. As Shazan drifted into the unknown realm, the initial peace he felt quickly gave way to a creeping sense of dread. What if this journey wasn't leading him towards the light, but into an abyss darker than he could have ever imagined? The sensation of weightlessness that had initially brought relief from his physical pain began to shift. Shazan felt an invisible force pulling him deeper into a realm of shadows. The once peaceful void around him started to transform, taking on an ominous quality that sent chills through his being. As he descended further, Shazan's senses heightened. The air seemed to thicken, pressing against him with an almost tangible weight. Shadows danced at the edge of his vision, morphing into grotesque figures that vanished when he tried to focus on them. The psychological impact of this unfamiliar environment began to take its toll, intensifying Shazan's feelings of anxiety and dread. The human mind, when faced with the unknown, often conjures up its deepest fears. For Shazan, this descent into darkness triggered a primal response. Each moment brought new terrors as his imagination filled in the gaps of what his eyes couldn't fully perceive. The absence of familiar reference points left him disoriented, amplifying his sense of vulnerability. As Shazan continued his journey downward, he became acutely aware of a change in the atmosphere. The air grew heavy with an oppressive energy that seemed to consume everything around him. A chilling presence permeated the space, extinguishing any remnant of hope or comfort. With growing horror, Shazan began to recognize the hallmarks of a place he had only heard described in hushed tones and ancient texts. The realization dawned on him with a sickening clarity. This was no heavenly ascent. Shazan was descending into the very heart of hell itself. The concept of hell, once an abstract theological idea, was now becoming a terrifying reality. Everything he had been taught about the afterlife paled in comparison to the visceral experience of this infernal realm. As Shazan grappled with this shocking revelation, his surroundings continued to evolve. The vague shadows began to take on more defined forms, revealing glimpses of tortured souls and malevolent entities. The air crackled with an otherworldly energy, carrying the faint echoes of agonized screams. With each passing moment, Shazan's senses were assaulted by new and horrifying stimuli. The oppressive heat, the acrid smell of brimstone, the bone-chilling wails of the damned, all combined to create a nightmarish landscape that defied comprehension. As he braced himself for what lay ahead, Shazan couldn't help but wonder. What forces had brought him to this place of eternal torment, and what purpose could such a journey serve? The cries of the damned echoed through the scorched air, each wail carrying a story of regret and eternal anguish. But among these tortured souls, Shazan would soon encounter faces that would shake the very foundations of his faith. Who could he possibly recognize in this pit of despair? As Shazan's eyes adjusted to the infernal gloom, the full horror of his surroundings came into focus. The landscape before him was a twisted mockery of the world he knew. The ground, a patchwork of cracked, blackened earth, seemed to pulsate with malevolent energy. Rivers of molten rock snaked through the terrain, casting an eerie, flickering light that only served to deepen the shadows. The atmosphere pressed down on Shazan with an almost physical weight. Each breath was a struggle, the air thick with the acrid stench of sulfur and decay. The oppressive heat sapped his strength, making every movement a monumental effort. In this realm of eternal torment, even the simplest actions became exercises in endurance. As Shazan stumbled forward, he began to make out the forms of the damned. Souls writhed in agony, their bodies mere shadows of their former selves. Some groaned in pain, while others engaged in futile struggles, clawing at the unyielding ground as if trying to escape their fate. The sight of such profound suffering sent shockwaves of horror through Shazan's being. Amidst the chaos, grotesque demonic figures moved with cruel purpose. These twisted entities took perverse delight in tormenting the souls, their mocking laughter a chilling counterpoint to the screams of their victims. With each passing moment, fresh waves of suffering rippled through the landscape, a stark reminder of the absence of hope, love, and light in this forsaken realm. As Shazan's gaze swept across the hellish panorama, a chilling realization began to dawn. Among the countless faces contorted in anguish, he started to recognize familiar features. Religious leaders he had once revered, scholars whose teachings he had devoutly followed. They were here, trapped in this place of eternal punishment. The sight of these once respected figures, now bound by chains of flame and shadow, sent Shazan reeling. Imams who had led congregations in prayer now howled in agony. Scholars who had interpreted sacred texts were reduced to gibbering wrecks, their vast knowledge rendered meaningless in the face of their torment. Each familiar face Shazan encountered deepened his shock and confusion. How could these pillars of faith, these guardians of religious truth, have ended up in such a state? The cognitive dissonance threatened to overwhelm him as he grappled with the implications of what he was witnessing. As Shazan struggled to process the nightmarish scene before him, a sense of dread began to build. If these respected leaders had been consigned to such a fate, what other revelations awaited him in this realm of eternal suffering? What truths about faith, salvation, and the nature of divine judgment were yet to be uncovered in the depths of hell? The flames parted, revealing a scene that shook Shazan to his core. Among the writhing masses of tormented souls, he began to recognize faces that had once commanded respect and admiration in his earthly life. Imams, who had led prayers with unwavering conviction, now howled in agony. Scholars whose words had shaped the faith of thousands now babbled incoherently, their vast knowledge reduced to ash in the inferno. Shazan's mind reeled as he tried to reconcile the revered figures of his memory with the broken, anguished forms before him. How could these pillars of faith, these guardians of religious truth, have ended up in such a state? The cognitive dissonance threatened to overwhelm him as he grappled with the implications of what he was witnessing. Each familiar face deepened Shazan's shock and confusion. He watched in horror as a once respected mufti, known for his strict interpretations of Islamic law, writhed in a pit of serpents, their venomous bites a constant torment. Nearby, a renowned hadith scholar who had dedicated his life to preserving the Prophet's teachings now found himself trapped in an endless cycle of suffocation and revival, gasping for air that would never come. The concept of divine judgment took on a terrifying new meaning as Shazan observed the specific punishments meted out to each soul. Those who had led others astray now bore the weight of their followers' sins, their bodies contorted under invisible burdens. Hypocrites who had preached virtue while indulging in secret vices now found themselves exposed, their inner corruption made manifest in grotesque physical transformations. As Shazan's gaze swept across the hellscape, a sense of dread began to build. If these respected leaders had been consigned to such a fate, what other revelations awaited him in this realm of eternal suffering? What truths about faith, salvation, and the nature of divine accountability were yet to be uncovered in the depths of hell? The air seemed to thicken with anticipation, as if the very fabric of this infernal realm was shifting to reveal its most shocking secret. Shazan felt an inexplicable pull, drawing his attention to a figure partially obscured by a veil of flame and shadow. As the veil slowly parted, Shazan's heart nearly stopped. There, amidst the sea of tormented souls, stood a figure so unexpected, so earth-shattering, that it threatened to unravel everything Shazan thought he knew about his faith. The face that emerged from the shadows was unmistakable, a visage etched into the heart of every Muslim from childhood. It was Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam himself, bound in chains of fire and surrounded by mocking demons. Shazan's world tilted on its axis. The sight of the revered Prophet in a state of eternal torment challenged the very foundations of his beliefs. As he struggled to process this impossible reality, Muhammad's eyes locked with his own. In that moment, Shazan knew that he was about to receive revelations that would forever alter the course of his spiritual journey, and perhaps the future of Islam itself. As their eyes met across the infernal chasm, Shazan felt the weight of centuries press upon him. What could possibly drive the most revered prophet in Islam to utter words that would shake the foundations of faith itself? The answer lay in the anguished depths of Muhammad's gaze, a truth so profound it threatened to unravel everything Shazan thought he knew about his religion. Shazan's initial awe at encountering the Prophet Muhammad quickly gave way to confusion and disbelief. The figure before him bore little resemblance to the venerated leader described in Islamic teachings. Gone was the noble bearing and serene countenance. In its place, Shazan beheld a soul racked by torment, his form bound by chains of ethereal flame. Muhammad's appearance challenged every expectation Shazan had held dear. The Prophet's eyes, once said to shine with divine light, now reflected an unfathomable sorrow. His skin, described in holy texts as radiant, appeared ashen and marred by the cruel attentions of his demonic tormentors. These malevolent entities circled Muhammad like vultures, their mocking laughter a stark counterpoint to the reverence his name usually invoked. The sight before Shazan stood in stark contrast to the exalted status Muhammad held in Islamic doctrine. As the seal of the prophets, Muhammad was believed to have delivered God's final revelation to humanity through the Quran. His teachings and example, known as the Sunnah, formed the bedrock of Islamic faith and practice. Yet here he stood, not in paradise, but in the depths of hell itself. As Shazan grappled with this impossible reality, he sensed a profound internal conflict emanating from Muhammad. The prophet's expression spoke of deep regret, as if the weight of his teachings and their impact on countless souls had become an unbearable burden. This anguish seemed to transcend even the physical torments inflicted by the surrounding demons. The air crackled with anticipation as Muhammad's gaze locked onto Shazan. In that moment, Shazan knew he stood on the precipice of revelations that would forever alter the course of his spiritual journey. What truths could be so earth-shattering that even the messenger of Allah himself was condemned to eternal torment for concealing them? Muhammad's lips parted, and Shazan braced himself for words that would challenge the very foundations of his faith. The prophet's voice, once described as melodious and commanding, now emerged as a pained whisper, barely audible above the cacophony of hell. Yet its impact was no less profound as Muhammad prepared to share the first of three shocking secrets that would rewrite everything Shazan thought he knew about Islam, salvation, and the nature of divine truth. What truth could be so earth-shattering that it would condemn Islam's most revered prophet to eternal torment? As Muhammad's anguished whisper reached Shazan's ears, he realized he was about to confront a revelation that would challenge not just his faith, but the beliefs of over 1 billion Muslims worldwide. Muhammad's eyes, once described as radiant with divine light, now reflected an unfathomable sorrow. His voice, strained and barely audible above the infernal cacophony, carried the weight of centuries of misguided teachings. "Shazan," he began, his words laced with regret, "what I'm about to tell you will shake the very foundations of Islam." Shazan felt a surge of resistance rise within him. How could he accept anything that contradicted the faith he had followed his entire life? Yet the sight of Muhammad in this state of torment compelled him to listen. "Jesus," Muhammad continued, his voice gaining strength, "is not merely a prophet as I once taught. He is the way, the truth, and the light." The words hung in the air, their implications rippling through Shazan's consciousness like shockwaves. This declaration stood in stark contrast to Islamic teachings, which regard Jesus as a significant prophet but not divine. In Islam, Jesus is respected as a messenger of God, but the concept of him being the sole path to salvation is fundamentally rejected. Muhammad's words now challenge this core tenet, aligning instead with the Christian belief expressed in John 14:6. As Muhammad spoke, his emotional state shifted. The sorrow in his eyes gave way to a fierce urgency, as if he understood the gravity of this revelation. "I was wrong," he admitted, his voice breaking. "The message I delivered was incomplete. Jesus is not just a prophet among many, but the very cornerstone of salvation." Shazan's mind reeled as he grappled with this information. He thought of the countless Muslims who, like him, had built their entire worldview around Muhammad's teachings. How could this fundamental aspect of their faith be so drastically mistaken? Muhammad seemed to sense Shazan's inner turmoil. "I know this is difficult to accept," he said, his voice softening, "but the truth of Jesus' role transcends the boundaries we've created between faiths. He is the bridge between humanity and the divine, a truth I failed to fully grasp and convey during my lifetime." As the full implications of this revelation began to sink in, Shazan felt a mix of confusion, fear, and a strange sense of awakening. If Jesus truly was the way, the truth, and the light, what did that mean for the millions who had followed Muhammad's teachings? What other truths had been obscured or misunderstood? Muhammad's gaze held Shazan's, conveying the weight of this secret and the urgency of its message. "But this is only the beginning," he said, his voice tinged with both relief and apprehension. "There is more you must know, truths that will further challenge everything you believe about our faith and the nature of salvation itself." Muhammad's eyes bore into Shazan's, their intensity conveying the weight of the revelation to come. "Shazan," he began, his voice trembling with a mixture of sorrow and determination, "what if I told you that the greatest truth about Jesus has been hidden from Muslims for over 1,000 years? The air grew thick with anticipation as Shazan prepared to hear a secret that would upend everything he thought he knew about his faith. As Muhammad spoke, Shazan felt his internal struggle intensify. The first revelation had already shaken him to his core, but he sensed that what was coming would challenge the very foundation of Islamic belief. Muhammad took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for the impact of his words. "Jesus is not just the way, the truth, and the light," he said, his voice gaining strength. "He is the only begotten Son of God." The words hung in the air, their implications rippling through the infernal landscape. Shazan's mind reeled as he grappled with this statement, which stood in stark opposition to the strict monotheism of Islam. The concept of God having a son was one that Muslims had rejected for centuries, viewing it as a form of polytheism incompatible with their faith. Muhammad's face contorted with regret as he continued, "I was wrong, Shazan. The teachings I spread about Jesus being merely a prophet led countless souls astray." His voice cracked with emotion as he spoke of the misguidance that had stemmed from his incomplete understanding of Jesus' true identity. As Shazan struggled to process this information, Muhammad delved deeper into the theological implications. He spoke of the Trinity, a concept that had been vehemently rejected in Islamic doctrine, but now seemed to hold a profound truth. The idea of God existing as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit challenged everything Shazan had been taught about the nature of divinity. The revelation of Jesus as the Son of God opened up new questions about the nature of salvation. If Jesus was indeed divine, what did that mean for humanity's relationship with God? How did this truth impact the path to eternal life? Shazan felt a growing sense of urgency to understand the full implications of this secret. Muhammad's expression softened as he witnessed Shazan's inner turmoil. "I know this is difficult to accept," he said gently, "but understanding Jesus' true identity is essential for grasping the full scope of God's plan for humanity." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in before delivering the final, profound statement. Jesus is the only begotten Son of God, the bridge between the divine and the human. As the echoes of this revelation faded, Shazan sensed that there was still more to come. Muhammad's demeanor shifted, his eyes flickering with a mix of fear and resolve. "But there is one more truth you must know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "A secret so profound that it will challenge everything you believe about redemption and the very nature of God's love." Shazan braced himself, knowing that whatever came next would forever alter his understanding of faith, salvation, and the eternal destiny of souls. Muhammad's eyes bore into Shazan's, their intensity conveying the weight of the revelation to come. The air crackled with tension as Muhammad prepared to unveil the last secret. "Shazan," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "what if I told you that the path to redemption lies in embracing what we've rejected for over 1,000 years?" The air crackled with tension as Shazan pondered the implications of this cryptic statement. As Muhammad spoke, a symbol materialized before them, a simple cross, glowing with an otherworldly light. "This," Muhammad said, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and regret, "is the key that unlocks the gates of salvation." Shazan's mind reeled, struggling to reconcile this revelation with everything he'd been taught about Islam. The cross, a symbol long rejected in Islamic tradition, now stood before them as a beacon of hope. Muhammad's expression contorted with pain as he continued, "I was wrong to deny its power. The cross represents the ultimate sacrifice, the bridge between humanity and the divine." His words echoed through the infernal landscape, each syllable laden with the weight of centuries of misunderstanding. Shazan watched in astonishment as Muhammad struggled to convey the full significance of this truth. The prophet's face reflected an ancient sorrow, a regret that seemed to transcend time itself. "The cross," Muhammad explained, his voice trembling, "is not just a symbol. It is the cornerstone of redemption, the embodiment of God's love for humanity." As Muhammad spoke, the theological concepts of atonement and sacrifice began to take on new meaning for Shazan. The idea that Jesus' death on the cross could serve as a means of reconciliation between God and humanity challenged everything he had ever believed about salvation. The notion of a divine being willingly suffering for the sake of his creation was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Muhammad's voice grew stronger as he continued, "Every soul must embrace this painful truth. The power of the cross lies in its ability to bridge the gap between our imperfection and God's holiness." Shazan felt a sense of anticipation building within him, as if he stood on the precipice of a profound revelation that would forever alter his understanding of faith and eternity. As the full message of salvation unfolded before him, Shazan began to grasp the magnitude of what Muhammad was sharing. The cross, once a symbol of shame and defeat in his mind, now stood as a testament to divine love and sacrifice. It represented not just a historical event, but an ongoing invitation to partake in God's redemptive plan. Muhammad's final words rang out with a clarity that seemed to cut through the very fabric of hell itself. The cross is the cornerstone of redemption, the only path to true salvation. Without it, all our deeds, all our piety, all our devotion is in vain. As the echoes of this declaration faded, an eerie silence fell over the infernal landscape. The stillness, however, was short-lived. As the full implications of Muhammad's revelations sank in, the demonic presences that had been lurking in the shadows began to stir. Their malevolent energy crackled through the air, a palpable force of opposition to the truths that had been unveiled. Shazan braced himself, sensing that the reaction to these earth-shattering secrets was about to unfold in a terrifying display of infernal fury. The eerie silence shattered like glass, giving way to a cacophony of inhuman shrieks. As the demonic horde descended upon them, one chilling question burned in Shazan's mind. Could the power of Muhammad's revelations withstand the onslaught of hell's fury? The atmosphere thickened with malevolent energy as demons materialized from the shadows. Their twisted faces contorted with rage, eyes gleaming with an unholy light. These weren't mere spectators anymore. They were active participants in a spiritual battle of cosmic proportions. The air crackled with tension, heavy with the stench of brimstone and the palpable weight of impending doom. As the demonic presence grew stronger, Shazan felt an overwhelming sense of fear wash over him. These entities were the embodiment of spiritual opposition, their very existence a challenge to the truths Muhammad had just revealed. Their hot, rancid breath seemed to sear the air around them, creating an oppressive atmosphere that threatened to suffocate hope itself. The demons' laughter echoed through the hellscape, a chilling counterpoint to the agonized screams of the damned. Their mockery was no longer directed solely at Muhammad. Now, their malevolent gazes fixed upon Shazan as well. He felt exposed, vulnerable, as if their very gaze could strip away his resolve and leave him defenseless against the terrors of hell. With horrifying speed, the demonic horde closed in. Their movements were a blur of shadowy forms and flashing claws, each one seemingly more grotesque than the last. They surrounded Muhammad, their taunts and accusations growing louder. "Leader of the misled!" they shrieked, their voices dripping with venom and contempt. The prophet stood firm, his face a mask of sorrow and determination as he faced his tormentors. But the demons weren't content with Muhammad alone. As if sensing the impact of the revelations on Shazan, they turned their attention to him. The full force of their malevolence bore down upon him, threatening to overwhelm his senses and shatter his newfound understanding. Shazan felt paralyzed, rooted to the spot, as the terrifying entities closed in from all sides. In that moment of crisis, Shazan realized the true nature of the spiritual warfare unfolding before him. This wasn't just about physical torment or fear, it was a battle for the very essence of faith and truth. The demons sought to bury the revelations Muhammad had shared, to keep souls trapped in darkness and doubt. As the first demon lunged towards him, claws outstretched and eyes blazing with infernal fire, Shazan found himself at a crossroads. Would he succumb to the overwhelming terror and reject the truths he had learned? Or would he find the strength to stand firm in the face of this hellish onslaught? The answer to that question would determine not just his fate, but potentially the fate of countless others who might hear his story. With the demons bearing down upon him, Shazan braced himself for a moment of truth that would challenge everything he thought he knew about courage, faith, and the power of divine revelation. Have you ever wondered how you'd react when faced with your deepest fears? For Shazan, that hypothetical became a terrifying reality. As demonic claws reached for him, a battle raged within his soul, one that would determine far more than just his fate. The infernal horde closed in, their twisted forms blocking out what little light remained in this hellish realm. Shazan felt the searing heat of their breath, the malevolent energy crackling around them like a storm about to break. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to cower, to do anything to escape the impending torment. But where could one flee in the depths of hell itself? As the demon's claws reached for him, Shazan's mind raced. The revelations Muhammad had shared echoed in his thoughts, battling against a lifetime of beliefs. Could he truly accept that Jesus was the way, the truth, and the light? That the cross, a symbol he had rejected his entire life, was the key to salvation? The cognitive dissonance threatened to overwhelm him, even as the physical danger loomed ever closer. In that suspended moment, Shazan experienced a clarity he had never known before. The veil between the physical and spiritual realms seemed to thin, allowing him to see the true nature of the choice before him. This wasn't just about escaping torment, it was about embracing a truth that could reshape his entire understanding of existence. The concept of free will took on new meaning as Shazan grappled with his decision. He realized that even here, in the bowels of hell, he had the power to choose. Would he cling to the familiar teachings of his past or embrace the uncomfortable truths revealed by Muhammad's anguished confession? As the first demon's claws grazed his skin, Shazan felt a surge of something unexpected. Not fear, but a profound sense of peace. In that moment, he made his choice. With a voice that seemed to come from somewhere beyond himself, Shazan cried out, "Jesus is the way, the truth, and the light." The words reverberated through the hellscape, carrying a power that seemed to push back the demonic horde. Shazan felt a warmth spreading through him, a light that began to shine from within. The demons shrieked in fury and pain, their attacks growing more frenzied, but somehow less effective. As Shazan stood firm in his newfound faith, he sensed a shift in the very fabric of reality around him. The oppressive weight of hell began to lift, replaced by a feeling of lightness and hope. Something was changing, something beyond his understanding, but unmistakable in its power. Just as it seemed the demons might overwhelm him through sheer numbers, a brilliant light burst forth from above. Shazan shielded his eyes, wondering what new revelation or challenge awaited him. Little did he know his journey was far from over, and the most unexpected intervention was about to unfold. The brilliant light that had burst forth was just the beginning. In the blink of an eye, Shazan found himself caught in a current far beyond his control. But was this divine intervention, or something even more profound? The truth would challenge the very foundations of his newfound faith. As the demon's claws grasped at empty air, Shazan felt a force unlike anything he'd ever experienced. It wrenched him upward, away from the infernal plains below. The sensation was both exhilarating and terrifying. One moment, he had been surrounded by the horrors of hell, and the next, he was soaring through a realm of indescribable light. Disorientation set in as Shazan struggled to make sense of his surroundings. The oppressive heat of hell gave way to a comforting warmth. The acrid stench of brimstone faded, replaced by a sweetness he couldn't quite place. Yet uncertainty lingered. Where was this force taking him? What awaited him at the end of this journey? As Shazan ascended, he felt a profound sense of release. The weight of his past beliefs, the terror of his hellish experience, the shock of Muhammad's revelations, all seemed to fall away. In their place, a feeling of lightness and hope began to bloom. Could this be the divine mercy Muhammad had spoken of? A second chance to embrace the truths he had learned? The transition from torment to tranquility was jarring. Shazan's mind raced to process the drastic change. The screams of the damned faded, replaced by a silence so profound it seemed to speak volumes. In this moment of cosmic shift, Shazan sensed he was on the cusp of something monumental. As the light around him intensified, Shazan felt a growing anticipation. He was returning, but to where? To his old life, or to something entirely new? The boundary between the spiritual and physical realms blurred, leaving Shazan suspended between two worlds. Suddenly, with a force that knocked the breath from his lungs, Shazan felt himself slam back into his body. His eyes flew open, blinking rapidly at the harsh light above. Air rushed into his chest as he gasped, the realization hitting him like a thunderbolt. He was alive. The sterile smell of a hospital room filled his nostrils. The steady beep of medical equipment replaced the otherworldly silence. As his vision cleared, Shazan saw concerned faces hovering over him. He was back, but he was profoundly changed. In those first moments of his return, Shazan knew with unshakable certainty that his journey was far from over. The revelations he had received, the choice he had made in the face of demonic fury, these would shape every aspect of his life moving forward. As he lay there, overwhelmed by the magnitude of his experience, Shazan couldn't help but wonder, how could he possibly convey the truth he now knew to a world that might not be ready to hear it? Shazan Danish's near-death experience left him forever changed, grappling with revelations that shook the very foundations of his faith. As he lay in his hospital bed, the weight of his otherworldly journey settled upon him like a heavy cloak. The beeping of medical monitors faded into the background as his mind raced with the implications of his encounter. The shock of his return to the physical world was palpable. Shazan found himself caught between two realities, the life he had known before and the profound truths he had witnessed in the depths of hell. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. How could he reconcile his lifelong beliefs as a Muslim with the earth-shattering revelations about Jesus Christ that he had received from Muhammad himself? Shazan's perspective on life, death, and faith underwent a seismic shift. The concept of Jesus as not just a prophet, but the only begotten Son of God, challenged everything he had been taught. The cross, once a symbol rejected in Islamic tradition, now stood in his mind as the cornerstone of redemption. These new understandings collided with years of ingrained beliefs, creating a spiritual turmoil that threatened to overwhelm him. As the days passed, Shazan experienced what could only be described as a profound spiritual awakening. The veil between the physical and spiritual realms seemed thinner now, allowing him glimpses of a greater reality beyond the confines of his previous understanding. He found himself questioning long-held assumptions about the nature of salvation and humanity's relationship with the divine. This paradigm shift didn't come without its challenges. Shazan wrestled with doubts and fears. Would anyone believe his incredible story? How would his family and community react to such a radical transformation of faith? The weight of the truths he now carried felt almost unbearable at times. Yet amidst the internal struggle, a sense of urgency began to grow within Shazan. The memory of Muhammad's anguished confessions and the horrors he had witnessed in hell fueled a burning desire to share what he had learned. He realized that his experience wasn't meant for him alone. It was a message that could potentially impact millions of lives. As Shazan's physical strength returned, his resolve solidified. He made a decision that would alter the course of his life. He would share his story, no matter the cost. The truths about Jesus Christ, the power of the cross, and the path to salvation were too important to keep hidden. Shazan committed himself to spreading the message he had received, knowing that it might face rejection and ridicule from those who couldn't comprehend the profound nature of his experience. With this newfound purpose, Shazan prepared himself for the challenges ahead. He knew that his journey of transformation was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. As he contemplated the best way to convey his message to a world that might not be ready to hear it, Shazan felt a mixture of trepidation and determination. The urgent need to share these revelations burned within him, driving him towards a future he could never have imagined before his remarkable encounter with the divine. Imagine holding a truth so powerful it could reshape the spiritual landscape of an entire faith. This was Shazan's reality, as he prepared to deliver a message that would challenge the very foundations of Islam. His near-death experience had thrust him into a realm beyond human comprehension, where he encountered revelations that shattered everything he once believed. Shazan understood the monumental difficulty of accepting such a radical message. The truths he had learned in the depths of hell contradicted centuries of Islamic teaching, yet the urgency of his mission burned within him. He knew that the eternal destiny of countless souls hung in the balance. "This is not merely an abstract teaching," Shazan began, his voice trembling with emotion, "but a profound revelation that carries weight and urgency." He paused, letting the gravity of his words sink in. The consequences of ignoring this message were dire, and he felt compelled to warn others of the spiritual peril they faced. Shazan's message centered on three key points, each one a shocking revelation from his encounter with Muhammad in hell. First, Jesus Christ was not just a prophet, but the way, the truth, and the light. Second, Jesus was the only begotten Son of God, a concept that challenged the very core of Islamic monotheism. Finally, the cross, long rejected in Islamic tradition, was the cornerstone of redemption and the only path to salvation. As he shared these truths, Shazan could almost feel the cognitive dissonance radiating from his audience. He understood their struggle, having grappled with these revelations himself, yet he pressed on, driven by the memory of the torment he had witnessed and the urgency of Muhammad's confessions. "I urge you," Shazan pleaded, his voice rising with intensity, "to reflect, to pray, and to seek the truth with all your heart." He knew that personal reflection and spiritual seeking were essential for anyone hoping to grasp the magnitude of these revelations. It wasn't enough to simply hear the message. Each person needed to wrestle with its implications for themselves. As Shazan approached the climax of his appeal, he felt a surge of divine energy coursing through him. The words that followed seemed to come from a place beyond himself, carrying a weight and power that left his audience spellbound. "Your eternal destiny hinges on the choices you make today," Shazan declared, his eyes blazing with conviction. "The consequences of ignoring this message are dire and should not be taken lightly." He paused, allowing the full impact of his words to settle over the room. In that moment of charged silence, Shazan posed a final, thought-provoking question that would linger in the minds of his listeners long after they left. Will you heed the warning and embrace the truth, or will you risk your eternal soul by clinging to familiar but misguided beliefs? Shazan Danish's extraordinary journey into the depths of hell and back stands as a testament to the power of divine revelation. His encounter with Muhammad and the shocking truths unveiled challenge not just the foundations of Islam, but our very understanding of salvation. The urgency of Shazan's message cannot be overstated. It carries the weight of eternal consequences for every soul. As we reflect on Shazan's experience, we're confronted with a profound question: how will we respond to this divine warning? The revelations about Jesus Christ as the way, the truth, and the light demand serious contemplation. This is not merely an intellectual exercise, but a spiritual awakening with far-reaching implications. Your eternal destiny hangs in the balance. Will you heed the warning? The choice you make today could echo through eternity. As Shazan's story reminds us, the veil between this world and the next is thinner than we might imagine. Are you prepared for what lies beyond?